Hi everyone, it's Nicole here today, and I have a new card share featuring this adorable fishbowl die cut set from My Favorite Things. I wanted to create a couple of encouragement type cards for my two youngest kids who participate in the local swim team, and I thought this fish set was just the perfect thing to create some fun shaped cards. And I especially love that the fishbowl is large enough that you can create a shaped card with it. I'm using some of these Sukaneko daubers to apply distress ink to my die cut pieces. I've already die cut all of my elements here for the fishbowl. I'm using some shabby shutters here on these green apple die cuts. This is Simon Says Stamp green apple cardstock, and the darker cardstock, the darker green cardstock is the green leaf, and I used the Mode Lawn Distress ink for it. The fishbowl itself with the wavy top where I wanted it to look like water is the Audrey Blue cardstock from Simon Says Stamp, and I used some tumbled glass around the edges of that piece. I like these daubers because they really allow for a little bit more precise ink placement on small die cut pieces like I'm using here. I love using the inking tools from Ranger when I'm inking backgrounds and larger pieces, but sometimes it's really hard to be a little more precise with small die cuts like this, so I find these little foam applicator dauber tools are perfect for that. I used the squeezed lemonade and wild honey on this fish here. Those are the distress inks I used, and the cardstock colors are the lemon chiffon and sunshine. And you can see the little fin for the fish is really teeny tiny. So I'm using the quick stick tool to place that. Now I'm using a little bit of the frayed burlap on the khaki Simon Says Stamp cardstock. And I like the way, instead of just a flat cardstock, which it looked great like that, but the distress ink helps define those edges and give it a little bit more dimension. Now here's where I was saying you can create a shaped card by simply taking a pre-scored card and placing it slightly lower than the die and taping it in place and running it through your machine. It will keep that scored line up at the top, giving you a shaped card. So I only put mine slightly below the top of the die because I didn't want to lose any of that shape, but I wanted it to still fold like a regular card would. Now I did die cut the front piece again from some vellum that I'll layer over the top. You wouldn't have to do that if you didn't want to. I just kind of liked the way the vellum looked there, so I went ahead and cut a piece for that. Now I used the wavy border piece on that inside piece already, the inside water piece. However, it was a little bit tall for the greeting that I want to use, and I want to place my greeting up at the top of the card. So I went ahead and just die cut that again and just took a little bit more off the top to give me a little bit more room to play with the greeting at the top of the card. So I'm just kind of laying out my elements and making sure everything fit. And I need to re-ink the top die cut edge of my water. So I'll just quickly add that tumbled glass distress ink there. And then I have this great sentiment from a new Simon Says Stamp stamp set from their Pure Sunshine release. This is the Thought Bubbles, and I'm going to use a couple of the phrase stamps here for the greeting on my card. And I'm stamping the scripty style phrase first that says, "You the best day ever," because I want my phrase to say "wishing you the best day ever." And it was just by accident that I realized it would look kind of cute if the rest of the greeting is going through that large word "wishing." And so I stamped it with Versamark first and heat embossed it with some American Crafts Wave embossing powder, and then I stamped it again using just whatever ink I had laying around. I didn't need anything nice. I stamped it on some masking paper, and I'm trimming it out to place over the embossed greeting. So once I have that all cut there, and I just kind of quickly cut around it, not very precise or anything like that. I just need the words masked off enough that I can ink up and stamp the word wishing right over the top of that phrase. So just trying to find the best spot to line that up. And then I want to make sure I press it really good so that the ink transfers both above and below. And I'm going to take some white embossing powder now and sprinkle that on. And once I heat set that, it looks really awesome because it's just a fun, different way to do a greeting. I love coming up or finding ways to do things like this that maybe weren't how it was intended to be used, but it worked out really well for this card. It fits perfectly at the top of this fish bowl. So now that I have pretty much all of the elements for my card, I'm ready to start putting it all together. And I did take the bubbles die cut from this fish bowl die set and die cut the bubbles from that Audrey blue cardstock. I'll show you here in a little bit. I also cut another piece of cardstock exactly like this Audrey blue piece, that's the water, out of the Island blue cardstock from Simon Says Stamp, and I'm going to layer that behind. And I could have just die cut the bubbles or and stuck them inside, but I just liked the look a little bit better of layering cardstock behind for whatever reason for this card. So I'm using a little liquid adhesive to put all of my die cut pieces together. Remove a little of that liquid glue that got squished out from his fin. I'll glue him in place. And I'm just going to continue adding the rest of the pieces for my card. And I had forgotten to ink up the other fish, so I'm going to do that now using some pumice stone distress ink on the smoke and then the slate Simon Says Stamp cardstocks. And I picked these darker cardstock for this fish purposely because I wanted to show a really fun technique here in a minute using the Picket Fence distress marker, which is the white ink distress marker, and it looks great on that darker cardstock. I'm using the Ripe Persimmon distress marker now just to make some little dots all over my fish. He looked fine the way he was, but I thought it would be kind of fun to give him a little bit more of a authentic fish-like look, maybe with the gills and everything. So I just placed the distress ink, I just dabbed it making little dots, and because distress ink reacts with water, I'm taking a paintbrush that I've just barely gotten wet. I squeezed a lot of the water out of the tip of my paintbrush, and I'm just wetting it a little bit to kind of make that ink move a little bit and not be quite so perfect little dots. I wanted it to not look quite that, exact. And then I'm using a little Wild Honey distress ink on the lighter parts of the fish, and I'm going to take some water again and squeeze most of that water out just so that the tip is damp and not wet. And I'm just going to brush over all of that until the water reacts with the ink and it kind of moves it around, giving it much less perfect marker lines. And I like how that looks. I think that's really fun. Now for the darker fish, like I was saying earlier, I'm going to use the Picket Fence distress marker. And when you first dab it on there, you don't see anything, but you're starting to see as the ink kind of absorbs or whatever into the paper, it starts turning white, and it looks really awesome on dark colored cardstock. And I had been using the brush tip end, and I flipped it around to use the bullet. The bullet end of the marker works much better. So I'm just adding a whole bunch of little dots all around here on this fish. And again, I will do the same thing. This is a distress marker. It does react with water, so I will wet the tip of my paintbrush and just kind of lightly move my paintbrush over those dots to kind of help mute them a little bit or make them a little less perfect. They look cute the way they are, and I wouldn't have to, but I didn't want them to be quite so in your face white. I wanted them to be a little bit more muted, and I love the way that turned out. So the Picket Fence Distress Marker is a really fun marker to use on darker cardstock. I'm going to tuck this little fish back behind some of the seaweed there in the fish bowl. And then I need to just secure the top of those a little bit. I'm going to use my liquid adhesive. And I'll set something heavy on top of that to hold it down while it dries for just a second. Get everything placed in position. Once I have all of that glued down, I am ready to adhere this piece to the island blue cardstock piece so that those dark blue bubbles show through the water. Just helps bring them out a little bit and makes them pop. Oh, and I had trouble getting it lined up, it looks like. Once I have that, I'm going to take some glossy accents and fill in those bubbles. And my glossy accents is almost empty and it keeps getting clogged, so I had to use a straight pin there to unclog it. And I'm going to add glossy accents to those, and it just really brings those bubbles, it draws attention to them, I guess. It just makes them really fun. And then I added a couple of dots for the eyes of dots of glossy accents for the eyes, rather, so that I could adhere these cute googly eyes. These are just little teeny tiny googly eyes. Because these cards are for my kids, I thought the googly eyes were a really fun touch. You could use, black enamel dots or gemstones or anything like that, but I thought the googly eyes were a fun, very kid-like touch. Now on the back of my card, I am using another new Simon Says Stamp card, Simon Says Stamp set, rather. This is the Made by stamp set, and it's perfect for adding those little stamped phrases and things on the backs of your card making projects or envelopes or anything like that. And I'm using two of the phrases from that stamp set, the Created for You by and Made This with Inky Fingers. I stamped Made with Inky Fingers using the Sea Glass Simon Says Stamp ink. And then I just hand wrote Mom on the back of the card. And here's just another look at those fun fish in the fishbowl die cuts from My Favorite Things, embellished with distress markers and distress ink. I hope this has inspired you to try distress ink tools and products on your die cuts. The supplies I've used for the card today are listed and linked below the video on YouTube. Please visit my blog for more information and details on the projects shown here today. You can subscribe to my YouTube channel by clicking the link shown here. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.